Welcome back to the Badass Literature Society, where badasses come together to rate and review novels recommended by you. Hi, I'm Michael.
This is Barbara.
And I'm Lauren.
This month we read The Red Palace by June Hur. June Hur is a New York Times and indie best-selling Edgar Award-winning author of YA historical mysteries and romances, including The Silence of Bones, The Forest of Stolen Girls, and A Crane Among Wolves. Born in South Korea, June spent her formative years in the USA, Canada, and South Korea before studying history and literature at the University of Toronto and working at the Toronto Public Library. Her work has been featured in Forbes, NPR, The New York Times, CBC, KBS, and more. June's next release, Adoration, a Jane Austen homage set during the Joseon dynasty, is slated for spring 2026. She resides in Toronto with her family and can be spotted writing in coffee shops. You can find her on Instagram and TikTok at June H. Writes. And Barbara and I had the pleasure of meeting her also at Y'all Fest in Charleston earlier at the end of 2024.
I wish I wasn't such a weirdo and shy and didn't say anything. I just stood there.
I don't get invited to these events.
Oh,
wow!
Maybe someday we'll do a podcast.
We talked about this. It will happen next year. We're doing
next year. We'll do it. Podcast trip to Charleston.
We'll be live for YA podcasting.
We'll podcast from the hotel in Charleston. Yes. Anyway, Barbara, would you like to give us some background info on the book?
Yes. So this was originally published on January 22nd, 2022. The genre is mystery, historical fiction, and YA, and it is 321 pages, depending on the version you have. Currently has a 4.1 on Goodreads, 4.5 on Amazon, and a 4.5 on Audible. It has been nominated for the Edgar Award for Best Young Adult in 2023, Evergreen Teen Book Award for High School in 2025, and the Green Mountain Book Award in 2024. At the time of this recording, it has not won any awards. We think it's important for readers to know what, if any, representation is in the books we read. So for this book, every character is obviously a POC character. There are no LGBTQ plus characters and no characters with disabilities.
All right, Lauren, do you want to give us a brief synopsis of the book before we dive in?
All right. Joseon, Korea. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. 1758. There are a few options of it.
Oh, well, y'all had the audiobook. How did they say it?
I didn't pay attention to that part. I can pronounce all of the character names, I feel like, but I don't think I paid attention.
Joseon?
Okay.
Joseon. Oh, well, there you go.
All right, that word, that sounds much better when you say it than I do. 1758. There are a few options available to illegitimate daughters in the capital city, but through hard work and study, 18-year-old Hyeon has earned a position as a palace nurse. All she wants is to keep her head down, do a good job, and perhaps finally win her estranged father's approval. But Hyeon is suddenly thrust into the dark and dangerous world of court politics when someone murders 4 women in a single night, and the prime suspect is Hyeon's closest friend and mentor. Determined to prove her beloved teacher's innocence, she launches her own secret investigation. In her hunt for the truth, she encounters June, a young police inspector also searching for the killer. When evidence begins to point to the crown prince himself as the murderer, Hyeon and June must work together to search the darkest corners of the palace and uncover the deadly secrets behind the bloodshed.
Bum, bum, bum.
I was going to say, I would say that, but we know what happens.
We do. It's true. It's not like the preview when we hear that in a second. Anyway, for now, what did you think about The Red Palace? And remember, no spoilers.
Spoils everything. No, I really liked it. Overall, I enjoyed the setting, the characters. I thought the pacing was good. I didn't have any trouble at all getting into the book. I didn't have any issues while reading the whole book. I wasn't I enjoyed the beginning, the middle, the end. I really, I hard pressed to find anything that was maybe if this, hell, if it was longer, but then obviously this is, I feel like, the perfect length for pacing purposes. It hit all the right beats for me. So yes, really enjoyed it.
I also really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really good story, really interesting. I love historical fiction, getting to learn a little bit about, a place and time that I'm not as familiar with. So that was cool. The pacing was mostly good for me. I felt like there were a couple spots that were a little bit slow. I don't know if that's the book, though, or just my ADHD, so I'm not going to give it any demerits for that. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it overall. I felt like it was kind of like a fantasy meets thriller to some extent, which everyone knows I enjoy a good thriller slash mystery, and I enjoyed the other elements too. So I ultimately thought it was enjoyable.
So we won't go into our individual ratings for now. Got to wait till the end for that. But our group score for this one was an 8.3 out of 10. So would you recommend this book? I think it's a pretty easy recommendation. If you're into historical fiction like I am, or if you're even if you're maybe not into that, but you're really someone who loves murder mysteries and that kind of story, I think this would be a good way to step into to reading about another culture and learning about that kind of stuff. So yeah, I would absolutely recommend it. I really enjoyed it.
I feel like I would recommend it. I think it covers, like I said, multiple genres. Although I definitely did forget that this was YA for a while, but I'll talk about that later. So like the whole time I was like, oh, it's like fantasy, thriller, mystery. Like I wasn't thinking YA, but I think it can appeal to a wide variety of people. So I would recommend it.
Yeah, I would easily recommend this book. I did forget that it was YA, to be honest with you. So I would say it can get a bit graphic. I didn't have a problem with it at all, but I do know some people are a little more sensitive to that, so just keep that in mind. But like I thought it was fine, but it definitely does it reads on upper part YA if you're going to consider that. Like the characters are 18, and so they actually legitimately act like 18-year-olds. If anything, they act like they're older, but of course this is like in, you know, South Korea in the 1700s, or I can't quite remember, like 1750 something. So, they're not dropping like, I don't know. It just reads older. So just keep that in mind, but I would easily recommend this book. I really enjoyed it. So
For those of you leaving us at this point, don't forget to give us a rating if you like us. Make sure you're following us on both Facebook and Instagram. Our handle both places is at Badass Lit Pod. We'd love to hear from you. If you've got a book you want us to read for the show, let us know. And now Lauren is going to give us a short preview of what we've got coming up next month. We will be reading Service Model by Adrian Tchaikovsky.
To fix the world, they first must break it further. Humanity is a dying breed, utterly reliant on artificial labor and service. When a domesticated robot gets a nasty little idea downloaded into their core programming, they murder their owner. The robot then discovers they can also do something else they never did before: run away. After fleeing the household, they enter a wider world they never knew existed, where the age-old hierarchy of humans at the top is disintegrating, and a robot ecosystem devoted to human well-being is finding a new purpose.
Dun, dun, dun.
it sounds like that one. Is it iRobot?
Yeah, but this sounds like a positive spin on that. Like the robots are going to work for human well-being, where usually it's like all the human destruction.
Right.
But
Well, so that last sentence, if you want to reread it, a robot ecosystem devoted to human well-being is finding a new purpose. So their design purpose was human well-being, and
Yeah,
they're
now
finding a
they're-
different purpose now.
okay,
They said, "F you guys, you're gonna
That
do
tracks.
this
Never
on
mind.
your own."
I
Or like
believe
that-
this is a story from a robot's perspective about
Breaking
F
free.
humanity. But
or
we'll see.
like that one video game that had little robots in it, and that they kind of was like this. What was that one game, Michael, called?
Nier, is that what you're talking about?
No, it's like the Heavy Rain people.
Oh, Detroit Become Human.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
this reminds me of.
Yeah.
I feel
Could-
like this
could
is
be.
going to be like a rogue Alexa. It sounds like the or like a Roomba vacuum.
A rogue AI. I guess we'll see as we dive into it for next month.
Oh yes.
Remember, the second part of this episode is going to be an in-depth look at The Red Palace by June Hur. So if you do want to read it, stop listening now and come back when you're done. Nom Nom is fresh dog food made by real people who really care. They're purposeful and enthusiastic about giving your dog the best food for them and their health, so they can thrive and be their best. Nom Nom delivers fresh food made with whole ingredients backed by veterinary science. And science tells us that dog health starts in the bowl, so improving their diet is one of the best ways to help them live a long, happy life. All you have to do is order, pour, and serve. Barbara and I have 2 dogs, Luna, a husky, and Quinny, a Shih Tzu mix. Our 2 dogs love the beef mash recipe, but to be honest, I'd say Quinny's favorite is the turkey fare. She drools when that comes out of the fridge. Yes, I know, Luna. I'm going to tell them about that right now. Luna is an extremely picky eater and always has been. She usually takes forever to warm up to new food, but not with Nom Nom. She dove in immediately. Both dogs seemed to have more energy, and Luna's stools were no longer soft. Your dog's health starts in the gut. A better diet means softer coats, more energy, better breath, and smaller, more consistent stools. Your dog can't tell you if they're healthy, but you can tell when their health improves. It's the easiest way to take the guesswork out of feeding your dog the best. Nom Nom meals are pre-portioned for your dog's exact caloric needs. Board-certified vet nutritionists are kind of a big deal, and Nom Nom has 2 on staff that work extensively to ensure everything gets sent out is the very best for your dog's livelihood. So how does Nom Nom work? You tell them about your pup, age, breed, weight, allergies, and protein preferences. Then they tailor a specific amount of individually packaged Nom Nom meals and send them straight to you. Store the meals in the freezer or fridge until it's mealtime. They'll give you specific instructions on how to transition your dog from foods like kibble to always fresh Nom Nom for best results. Watch your dog clean their dishes, dance for dinner, and overall thrive. Ready to make the switch to fresh? Order Nom Nom today. Go to a link in the description of this episode and then use our referral code BADASSLIT. That's BADASSLIT and get 50% off your first order plus free shipping. Plus, Nom Nom comes with a money-back guarantee. If your dog's tail isn't wagging within 30 days, Nom Nom will refund your first order. No fillers, no nonsense, just Nom Nom. Now, for those of you sticking around for the spoilers, here we go. So like always, we're going to jump into the second half of the podcast by talking about who we think the Badass Character Award should go to. Barbara, who is your nominee?
My nominee is Hyeon. Is that how?
Yun.
So it's Yun.
That's also my nomination.
Yeah, that's mine. For obvious reasons.
I also chose her. I was between her and Yeojin though, honestly, because I felt like they were both badass in their own ways, but she won out.
Yeah. I feel like she had more to lose being a woman at that time, doing what she was doing. So that's why I feel like
she did, yes.
Agreed.
You know, like she had way more to lose, since like as a society she should not have been doing what she was doing, versus him, like he was a cop, he should have been doing that. Not to say the other cops, it's one of those books where the cops are just disastrous, but one character, you know, that's this one.
The corruption.
Let's jump into a little character discussion. We'll let Lauren start off this time, and she's going to tell us about our character that just won the Badass Character Award, Yoon.
Yes, so our lovely Yoon protagonist, she is a badass palace nurse with a strong sense of justice and determination. She's the daughter of a disgraced nobleman and becomes deeply involved in solving the murders at the palace, essentially. Or at the... I don't know how to say that word. I'm not going to butcher it.
I was saying Hymencio, but...
Hymencio.
But obviously the H isn't pronounced, so is it
Yemencio?
It would be Yemencio. I think we can safely just say the murders at the Red Palace. That's the name of the book.
No, but it wasn't at the Red Palace, because this is at the nursing...
Like, you're right.
The School of Nursing building.
Yeah, that's why I said like the palace, and then I backtracked because I'm like,
Yemencio.
It's not.
Murders at the Yemencio.
Once again, you guys listen to it. How is it pronounced? I have zero context because I read the book. I didn't listen.
I would need to go back and specifically listen to that word said. My brain just like filters it out, I guess.
Oh.
Anyway, she's the protagonist. She's a badass. She spends a lot of time basically just fighting against all of the things that are in place to hold her back, and we get to watch that kind of unfold.
All right, and then so that's our protagonist, or one of our protagonists, Yoon. Lauren, would you also like to tell us about our other protagonist, Joseon?
Anyways, okay, Yeojin is a police inspector who ends up assisting Yoon in her investigation. So he goes against commander's orders to investigate despite, and he's loyal, principled, becomes a key ally, and a potential love interest, I like to believe, to Yoon.
So those are our two primary characters. Barbara, would you like to talk a little bit about Nurse Jeonsu?
Yes, so she is I would say one of the senior nurses at the nursing teaching building. And she is the one who kind of took Yun under her wing, essentially, and like mentored her since she was a little kid. Like, she's essentially the one who was like, hey, you're gonna be a nurse, come with me, and kind of made her into like a little protege type thing. And so she's important because she is the person that the commander of the police commander, pretty much says is the one who murdered the 4 women, and has kind of a grudge against her, and that's why he isn't trying to find the actual killer. He wants to pin it on her, and that's why Hyun gets involved in the whole trying to solve the murder, is because of her, because she wants to what is the word? I don't know. There's a word. English
She wants
is
to prove
hard.
that her mentor is not the one.
Yeah, I know
not a
there's
criminal.
word for that. But anyways, that's why. So
Absolve.
Yes, absolve. She wants to
There it
absolve
is.
her from the murders, because she knows for a fact that it wasn't her, and like she's pretty much the catalyst that got Hyun involved in the whole murder scheme to begin with. So
Our next character is the Crown Prince, Jang-yeon. He is a complex and enigmatic royal figure who becomes a central suspect in the murders because the actual murderer is trying to pin it on the prince because she has a grudge against the prince, and the prince is actually a pretty awful person. So she's trying to pin it on the prince, and his actions and what he does, and the fact that he's being framed for these murders does drive a lot of the story and the plot forward, and provide a lot of the tension as well. Our final character we're going to talk about is Nurse In-young, and I will let Barbara talk about her.
So Nurse In-young is the person who actually murdered the 4 women at the beginning of the novel, and we find out obviously throughout the whole book the reasoning behind it is because the Crown Prince actually is a murderer. It's just he didn't murder those 4. He murdered her mom, and then the 3 other nurses that saw him murder them pretty much had to like sign what would have been our time an NDA saying that he did not in fact murder them because he's the prince. So she got pissed off and wanted revenge essentially on the prince, and then those 3 women that hid the fact that her mother was murdered by him, and like no justice was served. And it's like this whole thing, and she's just very angry about it, and it's funny because like she is a character that I really liked when we first meet her, because like all the other nurses, she has like this stigma with her in the society, and Yeon is like kind of the only one who's actually really nice to her and isn't bothered by all these other outside factors telling her that she shouldn't be friends with her. So I find her an extremely interesting and very complicated person, because it's like I was rooting for her, I liked her, and then you come to find out that she kind of did some really terrible things in her plight for revenge against the prince. And same with the prince, like he also, like, you think he seems like a really cool character, and like you feel his pain because his dad's kind of being a dick to him, and then you find out like, oh, Eve, like it's this is why I think even the side characters are just really great. Like the little that we get of them, I found them like they're not like, oh, they're evil and this is why. Like they're very complicated, very gray, morally gray characters, and it was very interesting to read about.
I love that you phrase it as she kind of did some terrible things when she murdered like 8 people.
No, she didn't. Well, okay, she did. She murdered the original 4 women, and then the other 2 women that knew about her mom's murder. So technically, she only murdered 6, if we're counting.
That's a lot of people.
That's Barbara's moral bar. 6.
It is.
Fine.
Yeah, 6
Anything
is okay.
Greater,
no, but like
anything
she
more than
is an
6.
actual like she literally learned swordsmanship and like defeated a dude who's been training his whole life in like swordsmanship, and she learned it in like 5 years to do all this. Like I find that extremely impressive. Like I stand for women's rights and wrongs,
I mean, okay.
It's a joke, children. It's a joke.
All right, so we'll dive into our first discussion question, which is the book starts with the brutal murder of 4 women at the Yemenso. How did this set the tone for the rest of the story, and did your perception of this event change by the end of the book?
So, yes, it was a hell of an opening, and this is literally the point where it made me completely forget this was YA, because I was like, like, it's not like like page one first sentence death. Like, we get a little bit of like a build up to like what's going on and then death. And even then I was just like, oh yeah, this does not feel like a stereotypical YA or whatever. As far as my perception, I'm not really, I guess my perception changed because originally, and this is like very sexist of me to think, originally I just pictured a man being the murderer. Like, it didn't cross my mind that a woman would have committed these murders at the very beginning. So I guess that kind of changed my perception of the killing. As far as like anything else, I'm not sure if, I mean, I guess that I kind of want to go back and reread it just to see if that would have changed now that once you find out or figure out who the killer is, especially because like it seemed like I don't know, the way the murder was described seemed like it was very brutal and precise and stuff like that. Because I was gonna say, like, when we discovered how the prince was like murdering people, like he beheaded people, so that like that didn't happen here. But like I don't think it was a killing for these women either. Like it seemed very like a passionate killing, if I would describe it. Like they say, like, oh, this was a passionate killing, like it's violent type thing. So I don't know. Outside of that, I'm not really sure if my perception of the event changed it.
So I agree with Barbara that it absolutely did not feel like YA, mainly because of this scene. It's a very graphic murder scene that's described. As far as the perception part of it, I think that like she was saying, it's written in a way that it plays into our built-in biases and stereotypes, and so you think, because of the level of brutality and how graphic this is, it's very easy to think, oh, that was clearly, number one, you think it had to be a man that committed the murders, and then when you start hearing about what the crown prince did, it becomes, at least it does a very good job pointing you, and it's like, oh yeah, I think it probably is the crown prince that that committed these heinous atrocities, and makes the big reveal all the better at the end. But yeah, I mean, it definitely set the tone. Like it was like she described, it was a hell of an opening. It was a very exciting way to start the book, and really just let it hit the ground running with the story. It was a great takeoff point.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think I was a little surprised, like I said earlier, about it being YA just with how graphic everything was. But I mean, it wasn't inappropriate by any means. As far as like setting the tone, I think, at first it seemed like just a straightforward act of violence, and like they obviously allude to it being politically driven or senseless or whatever. And like Michael said, they definitely make it so that you are looking in a certain direction, which I feel like is either, I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, oh, it's not going to be him because that's the most obvious answer. But then I feel like some books, like the most obvious answer is what it ends up being. So Barbara's the queen of predictions, not me. Anywho.
No, why must we always bring this up? Maybe one of these days y'all won't.
It's true.
Because it's true, Barbara.
No.
Because it's true.
Obviously, it ended up being less straightforward than it appeared on the front end. I think it did set the tone for the rest of the book. I think obviously my perception changed by the end of the book because you learn more information about what was actually happening. So, but yeah.
The book explores the tension between justice and the abuse of power. Do you think true justice was achieved by the end of the story, or did the powerful still manage to evade accountability? I was about to say, what a great question, but then I feel it's very self-serving because I'm the one that writes the questions.
Yeah, anytime you do that, it's hilarious to me when you're like, what a great question. Anyways, pat.
So I think that, God, so I think justice was achieved, sort of, and it's because, like, yes, the person who eventually faced justice is the person who committed the murders. There was obviously like a greater situation at play, and I think that, well, I mean, we know, I guess, from history that the crown prince never really faced justice for the extent of all of his crimes that he committed, and it was obvious in this story that even without like Commander Song's bias of wanting it to pin it on Nurse, the nurse that was the main character's mentor, like the royal family was just like, you know what, he is pretty crazy, the psycho, our son. So the royal family was obviously their goal was, if it is the crown prince, just pin it on anybody else. It can't be put on him. So the whole book, you're thinking like that justice isn't going to get served because the crown prince, at least I was thinking the crown prince towards the end especially was maybe the actual killer. So it's a complicated situation because the person who did the killing got justice, but the reason that she did the killing was for revenge for other killing, and it's just the whole cycle of violence just begets more violence. So I think the powerful still managed to evade accountability in the sense that they weren't held accountable, and even Yoon's dad, who is a pretty shady person in the entire story, also, and he gets punished for a minute, but then because of something that Yoon does, like she uses her favor with the king to get him back, and so the powerful still remain powerful and still evade really any serious consequences. So
Yeah, I felt like it was bittersweet. Like they did get justice in some ways. Obviously, had they not gone after and investigated themselves, like that nobody would have had justice. But I felt like I wish we would have seen more legal systemic kind of justice for like everybody involved and not just kind of the not like personal win, but like kind of they got more personal or like moral wins in the sense that like they figured out who did the murders and like, but like Michael said, those murders were based on a whole systemic problem that I feel like we didn't see justice for that necessarily like I would have wanted to.
Yeah, I'd say it's sort of for me. Like, I don't know about true justice was achieved by the end of the story. Yes, sort of, kind of, and like Lauren mentioned, it is bittersweet. I feel like Commander Song should have gotten into trouble for just being a shitty person. Like he made zero effort into actually finding who did the killings. He wanted to pin it on what's her face, like I mentioned earlier, and he had no problems doing that. As a commander of the police force, wouldn't you want to figure out who is actually killing these people? Because then you're just putting an innocent person because you held a grudge against them. And I understand like learning about like why he does. I get it, but at the same time, like you're in a position of power, you shouldn't abuse your power. And he 100% did, and we have zero resolution for that aspect. But I feel like that's maybe during that time period that was expected or that was common. And like Michael mentioned, same with Yoon's father. Like he got in trouble for lying and all this stuff, but then she was like, "Hey, this is what I'm asking for solving the crime and stuff like that. Like, can you pardon him?" It was kind of, he just got a little slap in the wrist type thing, you know. As far as what you guys mentioned about the prince, he actually did get in trouble. Is just if you have to read the author's notes towards the end, because this is a true story, but kind of not. Like it's a historical, like the prince was a real person. The fact that he was murderous and murdered a bunch of people is all historically true and accurate, and it was very like that was really cool learning about all this other stuff. So in that aspect, I feel like that we kind of did get a bit of justice. It's just I feel like obviously you understand why she was going and wanting to pin it on him, but it starts from the top. Issue is like these people in position of power didn't get in trouble for not doing their jobs, and I mean, and what's her face died, so she didn't really get in trouble either. I mean, I guess her like name was like, I don't know, like people found out who actually murdered these women and stuff like that, and that was a thing, I guess, that happened, and someone didn't get in trouble. Like she was proven actually innocent. She got out of prison and she didn't die because they were gonna kill her. Apparently that's a thing there. Like you do a crime and you die. So it's like, well, an innocent person didn't lose their life because of what happened. So, you know, was justice served, sort of.
moving on to our next question, how did you feel about Crown Prince Jeongyun's involvement in the murders? Were you surprised by his true nature and his ultimate fate?
I mean, I feel like I was and was not surprised by his involvement. I think, I like I said, you're made to believe that he's responsible for the 4 women from the beginning, just because that's the picture that gets painted. And I think so. I was a little surprised that it wasn't him, but not in a big bam shocking way, just over the course of time, I guess. And then, but he still was a shitty dude. So part of me still wished that he would have been more so held accountable for the crimes that he did commit, all the shit that he did do. I mean, I know there was a little bit of that, but another part of me had sympathy for him too, which I don't know what that says about me, because
you're an empathetic person.
Yeah, I mean, because I felt bad for him, and then I felt bad for feeling bad for him, because he was such a bad dude. But it's yeah, I don't know. He was multifaceted for me, that whole.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, these characters aren't, it's not your stereotypical twirly mustache bad guys, really they have the motivations are great. You can at least empathize to why these, maybe not the prince and his random murder sprees, but you can empathize with them, and you can see the motivation of what was happening to all these characters and why they did the things that they did. As far as how did I feel about his involvement in the murders? It's funny because these murders, these 6 women that were murdered, had nothing to do with him. As far as yes, he's the cause of why this is happening, but he himself did not murder these women. Not to say that he didn't murder people, but he did, obviously. You learn about that, and I thought it was an interesting twist, and it's not one of those oh wow, shock, the murderer is this person. It was one of those twists where you're he is essentially a bad person for murdering these other people, but he himself wasn't the one who did it for these women. So that was interesting and weird, because was I surprised by this true nature? It's hard because we see him being nice to puppies, being frustrated that his father isn't seeing him what you think, he's a painter, he draws, and his dad goes and rips the drawing, and he's painted as this very sensitive person. And you as a reader, when you're reading this, you don't your biases to a lot of oh, a murderer is a cold person, it kicks dogs, kicks kittens, kills birds, that kind of stuff is what you normally think of someone who is a serial killer or something like that, who's murdering these people out of anger issues and all this other, obviously multiple reasons why people are murdering people. And he's not painted that way. And it's a little bit surprising when you learn his kind of true nature is an aggressive, he doesn't know how to emotionally handle his emotions and his anger towards his father. So obviously he's taking it out on these people and beheading people randomly. And then when you find out you get this really crazy chasing of when he's trying to kill Yoon for what he suspects is her meddling and stuff like that, and then you see him doing this terrible thing, you're oh boy, this is kind of crazy, because he was not painted like this. He seemed like such a sensitive person, and he has daddy issues, and that's what, so it's very interesting to see all that. As far as his ultimate fate, like I said, in the actual book, you don't learn what happens to him. But like I mentioned just a second ago, if you read her, the author's note, you learn that actually he was punished. And the reason why it was such a touchy subject was back then is if he wasn't, if the king sentence him to an actual normal murder, killing, get rid of him, then his whole family line would also go with them, and that means they would end the royal line, because he had a son and the son had to die as well. And so the way that the king did it was he literally sentenced him to go out in this field, and obviously I'm not doing this the justice, so just read the author's note, and he essentially starved and died of dehydration. And that's how they punished him, so the rest of his family wouldn't be punished.
Didn't they put him in a rice vat or something?
Yeah, something like that. So his ultimate fate is he did die for the crimes that he did commit. It's not talked about in the actual book. It's very interesting because it is a true story. This is a real person. Obviously, I think she changed his name. He was called something else, but like, without reading that, you would think like, oh, the royal family hid the fact that he murdered all these people. No, actually, he did get in trouble for it. It's just not touched upon on the actual book. So I found that really interesting. And his dad did not know that he was doing all this, and when he found out, he actually did do something about it.
I don't have a ton more to add based on what you guys have both said, but it was surprising, like you both have said, to learn that he was actually doing all this stuff, and it's not difficult to argue that he was the match that started the fire for all the other violence that did happen in this book, since him having the murderer's mom beheaded is what kicked off her whole murder spree to try to get him in trouble. So, like I said earlier, violence only begets more violence.
Arguably, he who incites violence is equally as guilty as the ones who committed it.
There you go. Moving on to our next question. Yun constantly faces limitations because of her gender, yet she persists in her quest for justice. How does the book handle the theme of gender roles, and did you find Yun's defiance inspiring? Yun's defiance inspiring?
It's like her defense. Yeah, it was really interesting to see how illegitimate children were treated differently but depending on their gender. Like, should I be shocked? No. Is it shocking? It shouldn't be. And yet it still does. Yeah, obviously women had few options to make something of themselves if they were considered a bastard in that time, while it seemed like the men had a lot more. Like, essentially, you were either what is a nice word for it? Like, you were a courtesan, I think is the term back then, or you were a nurse. That was your only two options as a woman. For men, it seemed like they still had plenty of things they could become and still like have an actual thriving future in things, even if they were a quote unquote bastard, So it was really interesting to see that. I thought it would have kind of been the same, but obviously, once again, not shocking, or shouldn't be shocking. Did I find her defiance? Of course. Like, it was great to see her breaking all those glass ceilings, and like she had this chip on her shoulder because of everything, of like of the injustice of her circumstances, and she was out there to prove something. And it originally was like she wanted to prove something to her father, but it changed throughout the book, and it was just amazing to see the character growth in her and how she handled all this stuff with a lot of grace and poise. Something I definitely wouldn't have had back then. I would have been like kicking and screaming at how frustrated. Honestly, I probably, like I said, like In Young, who ended up murdering all these people. Like, once again, I'm not saying what she did is right, so I want to just clear cut that. But I think it's cool to see how she saw what happened, knew that maybe nothing was going to happen to the prince because of who he was, and took it upon herself to like, this is like the long con. This woman did this long con. She literally, like I said, studied swordsmanship and became this badass swordsman to do this. Like the steps that she took to get her revenge. I have to applaud her for that, because like, as a woman, like, you don't have any of these, like, as back then, a dude was like, I already know how to fight, so I can just go stabby, 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 no problem. Like, the steps that she took to do this is like, wow, dang, okay. Like, she's serious about her murder, So it's just kind of nice to see all these really, and it's different, like, all of these 3 or even 4 like women that we get, these characters are so drastically different, but all are, if you ask me, like, fighting stereotype of like women can't be XX and S. Like, they're proving it in different ways, and you can see like maybe this is a better way of solving an issue instead of going in murder spree. So it was really interesting to see them all kind of breaking these stereotypical gender roles in this book.
100% agree with what Barbara said. It was really cool to see. Well, so it was interesting to learn, I guess, how the gender roles were defined, and then see how she broke through that over and over again. But I think it was especially also cool, and I not going to just reiterate everything Barbara said, but it was neat to see Joseon, the male police inspector, recognize her value in a time where men were, I mean, you see all the other men in this story are kind of like, whenever she tries to bring something up, or anytime a woman tries to like have an idea, they're like, oh, you're just a silly woman, get to the side. No. And Yojin recognizes like no, she's smart, she knows this stuff, like she can be helpful. He recognizes her value, and it sucks that like she's not able to, maybe be a police inspector or be something like that herself. But it was neat at least to see that like he knew that, hey, she's really good at this. Like I'm going to figure out a way to, even if we have to, hide and keep things a little bit secretive, have her help. And she ends up doing a lot of the work to solve this investigation. I think it wouldn't be hard to argue that without her, it wouldn't have happened. So that was really cool to see.
I'm going to try not to be too redundant here. Yoon is constantly up against her environment when it comes to gender roles, but I feel like a lot of women during that time in that location have similar experiences, and hers is exacerbated because she was illegitimate in certain ways. Obviously, like women in general in Korea during that time were expected to be very obedient and more traditional. So like the fact that she was ambitious and whatnot made her stand out from the start for that. I found myself being frustrated on multiple occasions just because she'd get dismissed because of her gender or whatever, despite she's super freaking smart and capable. And I also appreciated that Yojin, who I ship them, which we'll talk about later, like saw her intelligence and saw her capability and like was, I don't know, like respected her. Anyway, I think her defiance is inspiring. I love a good female resistance arc. Also think I found hope in the fact that even though she didn't fix the whole oppressive system, like she was still able to stand up for like what was right and get justice in her own ways, and it did make a difference, which I just needed to see that while navigating our current political hellscape we're in right now. Right? I felt like this novel was timely for me, so not that I'm going to go start murdering people to get revenge, but
like I said, there's better ways to
But yeah, I appreciated her defiance, and I think like it was just a timely read for me. So
moving on to our next question, names and titles play a significant role in the story, from Yun's struggle with her family's disgraced name to the way characters are defined by their social status, like nurse, prince, inspector. How do names and titles shape the characters' identities and their interactions with others? And do you think the story suggests that names define a person, or can they overcome those labels? So I think that this story depicts a world where the status quo and the culture very much wants to define people by their name and their title, and they very much want that to be this rigid, class system. And I think that this is a story about, kind of like how we just talked about in the last question, really bucking that trend and showing that people are more than what their perceived status based on name or title alone is. For example, like with Yun, like she was just known as Nurse Yun. That was her title. That's what she got to be. Her last name mentioned that she was a bastard, so she was even less of a person seen in on the status ladder. But in reality, like she was a palace nurse. She acted the roles of the inspector. She does all these different things throughout the novel, and I think a lot of the characters do. And when our culture or the world is trying to shove people into a box and define them by these limited scope things, it puts, I mean, for some people like Yun, it causes them to want to break out of that box and do whatever they want to do. And that's a really inspiring story to see. But you have to also remember there are a lot of people that are probably living in this world that we didn't hear about in the story, that they're like, okay, that's my box. I guess I'm going to stay in my box. That's all I get to do. And so it was really cool to see, especially in a time and culture like this, see her break through and be bigger than her name was ever, supposed to quote unquote allow her to be. So it was cool. It was really, really neat to see that world be set up the way that it probably historically was, and then see her kind of break through all of that and become bigger than her name was supposed to allow her to be.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add to that. I think she was able to overcome her labels in certain ways. And I feel like the next question's a little bit redundant that I want to say on that one, so I'll just save that, I guess. But she didn't kind of allow the stigmas, or I guess she got to a point where she didn't allow the stigmas assigned to her based on her status of like illegitimacy and like her family name define her worth and like the future that she wanted or whatever. So I think that Michael said it pretty well. So
as far as names and stuff, like I know in Asian culture, someone's name is very important. What you name your child can be seen like a curse or a blessing. And we've read a few books, and I've read more upon this because I was very interested in this. Like what you name your kid is very important in their culture. So I feel like it was very poignant since Yun's name is seen as a masculine name, and she always thought that meant her mom didn't like her or was trying, like, wish that she was born male, you know, like she has like this grudge against her mom, and it starts off with, I feel like, the name, because like a few instances in the book people mention like her name and it being a masculine name, and then obviously you come to find out that's not the case, and the whole reason why her mom named her what she did was actually really like aw moment, you know, at least for me it was. And I'm going to focus more on names versus how titles, like, because you guys did more of the title stuff, so I'm not going to beat a dead horse on that part. The naming system is also very important if you pay attention, because you can catch on who the killer is before it's revealed because of the names and how they name people. It's because Nurse In Young's name is similar to her younger brother's, and you can be like, oh, and you find out that it's his mom that gets murdered and all this stuff. So then you can be like, oh, okay, this is who did it, because she actually has a motive. So it's a very sneaky way to let the reader know, and I feel like if you pay attention to that, you'll pick up on that. And just as a whole, their whole naming system is very interesting, because you do pick up on things, and like they have such an emphasis on names, and in Yun's case, she sees it as a burden because of her name and what her mom named her, and then later in the book she finds out it's quite the opposite. So yeah, I found it really interesting, and once again a little nod to the readers if you pick up on who the killer is before they explain it because of names.
Our next question is, how did Yoon's character evolve from the beginning to the end of the story, and what were the key moments that defined her growth?
I feel like she went from being like the dutiful daughter and palace nurse seeking everyone else's approval at the beginning to a much more independent, badass, brave woman seeking justice, forging her own path kind of by the end. I do think her decision to investigate the murders was a key moment early on, just because it was the first time I feel like she was actively questioning authority rather than, like Michael said, just kind of staying in the box that the nurse, kind of following orders sort of situation. Another defining moment I felt like would probably be when she finally let go of the need to get the validation from her father. Because I think that ultimately allowed her to move forward and kind of grow and become her own person. So
yeah, I mean, she went from thinking her mom didn't care for her, constantly trying to get her father's approval, and thinking her only value was being a palace nurse, since that was like the highest thing she could reach as a woman and be in her standing, to then going to like having this seemed like a way better relationship with her mom, telling her dad essentially to F off. And still saving him, mind you, and being like I didn't do this for you, but like now you can finally see like what I bring to the table, and he obviously realized it, but I felt like it's a little too late for that type thing. But and then the most important thing is just seeing herself as just more than just a nurse, or just a palace nurse, or just a woman. Like she saw the value in herself. And I think the pivotal moment is when she decides to investigate the murders at the beginning, and then when especially because she felt like so that, and then when she still continued to want to do this when she pretty much lost everything, and the reasoning was because it was the right thing to do. You know, at this point she already, like, she lost a position as a palace nurse. Her dad pretty much shunned her and said she was a disgrace, and kicked the family out of his quote unquote family home and all this other stuff. And she still continued on this plight of hers because she knew like she had to save her mentor, and also knew like I want to get the killer out of the roads, because if not they're going to keep murdering people or doing this, you know, like she. So yeah, like those key moments of her character I feel like were kind of those parts.
Oh yeah, no, I definitely agree with what pretty much everything you said, actually, Barbara. It was her character growth was honestly probably my favorite part of the story. Getting to see, like, you know, she's born a bastard. Her mom initially only thinks that she's good enough to be the equivalent of a prostitute. I forget what the term is, but she tried to sell her to like a brothel, and then Nurse Jung-sung, who is her mentor, was like, actually, no, we're not doing that, and grabs her, and she shows her, no, you can be so much more than that, and lets her. So she becomes a palace nurse, but then she breaks that glass ceiling and becomes even more like Barbara and Lauren both said. And it was really, really awesome to, like, her character arc was really interesting and fascinating to read. And I feel like at the end, when she, like Barbara said, was like kind of like an FU to her bastard father, but then she had that power move of getting to be like, but here's your shit back. Like, I don't really care about you, and I'm still not really going to see you as my dad, but look at what your daughter can do. Like, that was
a
such
great
a
moment.
such a boss move.
Yeah.
To be like, hey, I know I'm just a bastard woman, but here's your titles and your land back. Like, no biggie. And that was cool. Like, when I read that scene, I was like, oh, like, just the moment of her getting to like subtly be a boss ass bitch. But that is that question. Moving on to our next question. Yojin risks everything to help Yun uncover the truth. What did you think of his loyalty and his willingness to defy authority? Did you find his actions believable?
So originally, when I read this question and answered it, I feel like I want to like. Luckily, no one is reading my notes, so I want to change my answer. I still think that the risk factor Yun was like, she was risking literally everything as a woman in that time. I think she had more to risk than he did. Not to say that he didn't, because he was literally defying his commander to keep pursuing the crime, and not just, you know, doing what the commander said and it's like, leave it alone, like, we found the killer, it's this woman. Like, he's like, no, I like, that's not true, and I'm gonna find that. So I feel like the risk level was a little bit differently, but that's not to say that what he was doing, like, I don't want to like be like, oh well, he didn't do anything. He did, because like Michael mentioned earlier, he saw the value of her and didn't look at her and be like, oh, you're just a woman, you don't know what you're doing, or you're what you're talking about. He was like, okay, like, I literally need her to help me solve this, because without her, either he's not going to solve it at all, or it's going to take him like way too long, and by that time an innocent person's going to die, and then they're just going to close the case, and it's not going to matter. And at a time where like men did not respect women or did not value women, like his mom, that we come to find out also wasn't like, she didn't come from this massive thing, and like she was essentially a nothing. I think she also was a bastard, and his dad defied society essentially to marry her and kind of got disowned by the family members. And he was, you know, like, he came from a family that respected women, and you can see those values ingrained in him, and how much he had respect for his mom and his dad, who taught him all these really cool lessons and value of people just in general. It's not even just like women that he looks like. You can see that he respects people, period. It doesn't matter if you have the title of commander versus petty thief, you know, like, you can tell like he genuinely does care about people, and because of that, it makes him a much better police person and actually do his job well. So the loyalty that he feels to his position, like, you can truly, like, we need more people like him in these positions, because that's the kind of person that I want to be helping solve any type of case, because you generally see that he respects people and he wants to solve it, not people like the Commander Song, who was biased and just wants easy, I don't know, money back then. Not that, just an easy case, you know? So I think as far as his actions being believable, yeah, like the reason why he did this was because he wanted to seek out the person who killed his father, which was the prince. The prince was the one who killed his father because he went and murdered all these people, and then his dad kind of got in the way, and he was in the way, and he got killed because of that. And so yeah, like it's his actions are believable, and also knowing his background and like why he does the things that he does and how he sees the world so differently than most people in this time period is because of his background and how he grew up.
So I think that was an incredible answer off the cuff from you, Barbara, since you changed your answer on that. I don't have a whole lot to add, but I will say that Joseon is like the archetype of my favorite detective or inspector character, the one who will stop at nothing to get the truth and actually figure out what happened. And his commanding officer, Commander Song, was the opposite of that. It's the police officer or the person you see that's in that role that is more invested in the political side of things and furthering their career and their status. And he Commander Song just wanted to get the case closed because that's what the royal family was asking for, and he's trying to appease the people that are even higher up in station than him, and so the political motivations there make sense. That's not the right thing to do, but I can see why he was doing that. But so yeah, I mean, Yoshion's character was incredible. It was fun to watch him not only wholeheartedly believe in Yun and realize that she is in some ways better than he is at his job. And he's like, hey, if I love this, let's work together. I'll do whatever I can to help. So yeah, his unwavering loyalty to her, to his family, and to his idea of what justice is. He was a really, really good character. Also, I really enjoyed his arc as well as Yun's.
Yeah, I feel like Yeojin was definitely fiercely loyal, which I can appreciate, but I feel like we already talked about that. He very easily could have been fearful of repercussions and just followed the commander's orders and turned a blind eye, but he followed his moral compass instead. And I feel like based on what we know about his backstory, it makes sense why he did what he did, and I felt like it was believable. And I also wish more people in similar positions in the real world would be more like him. But alas, the horrors persist.
But so do I. Let's see. Our next question. How do the themes of family and duty play out in the story? Consider Yun's relationship with her father, Yojin's loyalty to the crown prince, and the royal family's dynamics. The murderer, Nurse In-young, kills the women at the Yemenso to avenge her mother's death and expose the corruption within the palace. Do you think her actions were justified, or did her quest for revenge go too far? How does the book explore the idea of revenge as a double-edged sword, both as a driving force for justice and a destructive force? Did you sympathize with her by the end, or did her methods make it impossible to support her cause? There's a lot of questions in one question, Michael. So did I think her actions were justified? Gosh, that's a hard question to answer. Because I can understand her anger and her seeing a lack of justice for what happened to her mother. And, it's an example of someone, you see like the dichotomy of it, where her and her brother, this happened to both of them. Their mother was murdered. They both know what happened. And it's the dichotomy there is that she was not able to let it go. And so she spent her life preparing and planning and putting together this grand plan of revenge. And her brother moved on and became a physician in the court and all of that. And so the dichotomy there. And so I don't think I can say her actions were justified, but I will say that I understand where she was coming from. Her quest for revenge was just that. I mean, it was a quest, like Barbara mentioned earlier. Like, she spent years learning how to do the things that she needed to do and planning on how she's going to twist things and how she's going to make this point towards the crown prince. She creates those flyers. I mean, there's it's a massive plan. So yeah, I think I lie somewhere in the middle. I don't think her quest for revenge went too far, but I also don't think it's hard to justify murder. Like, I think I would have an easier time if she killed the crown prince, to be honest, than the fact that she
Right.
killed all of these other innocent people.
Yeah.
But I also can see why she wants him to suffer, and in her mind, he needs to face justice. And unless she can force people to see that he is a murderer, there's no other way that she's going to get that justice that she thinks he deserves. The book absolutely shows the idea, like I just said, the dichotomy, the double-edged sword. In her mind, she sees it as a driving force for justice. I think her brother, though, sees that it's like this revenge has eaten up and destroyed his sister. Like, we see a little bit of that there, where like, God, there's this scene where we find out that her brother is the one that poisoned her because he's trying to stop her from killing all of these innocent people. And that had to be like the hardest thing he probably did, because it's his sister and he gets it. He's, I'm sure, got that pain inside of him from the mom dying. But so you see it as like it's both sides of that story, where like she's driving forward and you've got that, like, almost like they describe the hero mentality that she's probably feeling inside of her as she's raging towards she sees as the finale. But then you also see the outside perspective of how destructive that is for not just her, but for other people that get caught up in the spider web. And like, she's killing people who have nothing to do with it anymore. Like, it's gotten out of control. And the last question, I sympathize with her, because like, she's not just this crazy person out killing people like the crown prince. Like, she's in pain, she's hurting, and did she take that and maybe go a way that she shouldn't have gone with it? Yeah, but I sympathize with her, because like, someone killed her mom and nothing happened. And I don't know how. I can't put myself in that situation, right? Like, I can't in my head just be like, oh, well, I wouldn't go off and go crazy. Like, I would, like, if someone I love was murdered and I knew who did it and the authorities knew who did it and no one was doing anything about it, I think I'd be pretty freaking pissed. And I don't know what I would do. And so I sympathize with her. Do I agree with the methods, especially her in murdering a bunch of innocent people? No, she went off script for her own plan. Like, she killed all these extra people that were starting to find out what was going on, because she couldn't have that and had to, pin it on the crown prince. And so no, I don't agree with her methods, but I do sympathize with her. The author, June Hur, did a really good job at balancing the scales there of both sympathizing and empathizing with the murderer, and also seeing the tragedy and the destructive nature of what's happening. And so you're seeing both of these things, and you get to decide as the reader, like, where do you fall on that? And it's really hard. And I think when it's written that way, and it's not, I love that, because it's not the author just telling you how to feel as the reader. It's they're trying to give you everything, and then you've got to weigh that. And this was written in a way where, at least for me, that made it hard. I feel like I've been talking a lot, and I'm going to pass it off to Lauren.
I mean, that was well said. I think I don't have a whole lot to add. I feel like it is hard, because obviously her actions had valid motivations, but I still can't justify the way that she went about it. I think she essentially sacrificed innocent women for her cause, which I can't get behind that. I do empathize, like Michael said, with her anger and the fact that she was desperate. And, not having been in that situation myself, it's hard to say how I would feel or what I would do. I would like to say that I wouldn't sacrifice innocent people, though. I think there's got to be a different way to go about that. But again, I've never been put in that situation, so I can't necessarily make assumptions, I guess, about that. I think she felt like desperate enough that was kind of a means to an end, and I think the pain that she felt over her mother's murder, now all of their families get to feel that. And so is that justified? I don't feel like it. I don't feel like it maybe is, but that's just my 2 cents.
So obviously, I've already touched base on quite a bit of how I feel about Nurse In Young. As far as actions were justified, no, even knowing what I don't think it was justified. I did think she went too far for the revenge, because if you look at it, and June did a really good job. Once again, I love the way she wrote these characters. You see two people who have the same motivation as wanting to get revenge on the prince. You have Nurse In-young and you have Yujin. And they both go about it very drastically. Now, the difference is, in Yujin's case, is he's a man in a society that respects his opinions and what he says, and he put himself in a position where he could do something different about it. The difference is she is a woman. She is considered a quote unquote low grade nurse because of her position, because the highest position for a nurse is the palace nurse, and she was the lowest one, which is essentially a nurse that works with the police in solving murders. And I think that's so cool. And back then I would have been wanting to be that nurse personally, but I digress. I thought that was weird that they were seen as the lowest of the low, but whatever. And so I feel like the reason why she took her path was because like she tried and no one was listening to her for multiple reasons. No one was doing anything about it. And so she's like, okay, fine, I'll do it myself. And she kind of went a little stabby crazy. Whereas him, and like I said, it's one of those things where like they're starting at different positions. Like she's all the way back here, he's up here. But still, that doesn't justify what she did. And it's hard because it's like, I understand. She probably did try to go through the correct ways of being like, hey, my mom was murdered by the prince, and no one paid attention, no one cared. I don't know, because like we didn't get that aspect. We kind of just got like an inklings about it, and so she went this route. So I just find it interesting that we do have two characters who are justified in wanting the crown prince to die or something to happen to him. She just went about it, I think, over the top. As far as like, does the book explore the idea of revenge? Yeah, actually, there's this quote that Eugen even says that his dad taught him, and it's the reason why I feel like why he didn't go down the path that she did, and it's revenge begets revenge. The anger is unquenchable. We become the monsters we are trying to punish. Justice, however, brings closure, and that is what I want. It can only be achieved by remaining sober-minded and rational. And in the end, it is not my place to punish the prince. It is the king's, and only the king's. All I can do is find enough evidence to make the truth undeniable. And that right there is the definition of the difference between them. Like, his dad showed him, like, that's not the way to do it. This is how to do it. And that's his motivation. That's how he's getting his justice in his dad being murdered by the prince. And hers was the other side of that coin, and just blatantly like red. She's seen red. She wants this, and this is how she's going to get it. I thought that was really cool. I love that quote. I highlighted that quote. I thought it was amazing. It pretty much paints the whole side of revenge versus justice in the book. Do I sympathize at the end of the day? It's hard not to empathize with her. I don't know about empathize with her, because of the position that she is in. As a woman, I get it. Because even now, I feel like we have to go to some absurd means for people to believe us in anything and things that we say and do, because of just our gender or like our position and where we are in the world. So like, I understand, and it's hard not to empathize with her, but at the same time, like I said, like she killed these innocent women, and like, were they innocent? Like 3 of them saw what happened and didn't do anything about it. But if you look at their position, and she didn't, is they're in the same boat she is. They're also women. They were literally told, if you say something, you will die, or if you say something, something will happen to your family. So like, they pretty much were in a position of a hard in a rock place, rock hard place, whatever that saying is. It's
rock in a hard place.
Like, they want to do something, and you can see how it tormented them, because like this happened a year ago, and these girls were like these lively women and all blah blah blah, and then like this whole last year of what happened, like it's described as like they're not themselves anymore, like they're filled with guilt and all this stuff. So clearly this affected them, and she, instead of siding with them and using them to her advantage, being like, okay, like let me get them involved, let's do something, let's pursue this secretly and exposed the prince. She just went and murdered them instead. And it's like, come on, we could have banded together and done something about it instead of just being like, screw you, I'm gonna kill you too because you're a problem, you know. So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, you can empathize with her, but at the same time, like, she obviously went about it the wrong way. So I loved her character. I really thought she was so interesting. Like, the motivation, all this stuff that you get behind it is, I'm just gushing at this point of great characterization for everyone.
It's okay. I think we all were gushing. All right. Our final question. The ending hints at a potential future for Joseon and Hyun. Did you ship them throughout the story? How did you feel about the way their relationship was handled?
I did for sure ship them. I think I said that earlier. I really liked how their relationship was based on like mutual respect and shared morals and not just on stupid infatuation. There weren't like a bunch of tropes, which I liked. I really appreciated that. Obviously, like, we don't get to see them as a couple, but I mean, it's all kind of pointing in that direction. Like, it may end up there. It's kind of left ambiguous at the end, but it felt much more relatable and realistic than it could have been had it been written, I feel like, with more tropey stupidity. I liked it.
So I guess I'm the only one who read, like, the physical book I have has an extra epilogue, I guess. And now I'm getting
Pray tell.
So I guess I'm getting confused of like what everyone else got as an epilogue and what I got as an epilogue. So I guess, did you guys get the lantern scene of them putting the lantern in the river together and being in an actual relationship? Oh, okay. Well, they are actually in the extra epilogue. Yeah.
Yeah, the epilogue in the actual like the regular edition of the book is only has them like they have like their walk together and they kind of like hold hands.
Yeah, it's like a maybe.
Oh, okay.
It becomes clear that because she's obviously worried that like they can't be together because
right,
of the
of
cultural stuff.
Her standing.
But so yeah, the regular epilogue in the book just hints that like maybe they're going to try it.
Oh, okay. Well, so let me start from the beginning. Obviously, I shipped them. Are you kidding me? Like, this is my thing. I loved their relationship. I thought, and I hate people, they need the fast bang, like, lust type thing. I hate that because it's not, I shouldn't say it's not realistic and all this stuff. Everyone's love story is different. I prefer the really long-winded will they, won't they, and at the end you just get like hand touching. That is my shiz. I want the slow burn of my relationship. I want to see them falling in love. I love that theirs isn't tropey. It's like Lauren mentioned, like, it's based on them just coming together for this cause and seeing how like they complement each other so well and how they fit together like a puzzle piece to work together to solve this, and how like they bring out the best in each other and how they support each other through good and bad and all this stuff. Loved everything about their relationship. This is my jam. This is my bread and butter. Loved about. As far as the second epilogue, yeah, the second epilogue is so cute because you actually do get them to see them in a relationship. Like, I think I would be really bummed out if I didn't get that extra epilogue because, like, yes, I wanted the slow burn, but I also want more than, like, like, will they, won't they? And you see them together, and it's such a cute little scene that they do. And then at the very end, there's this little note that she writes to him, and y'all, I will like send you like I will take pictures of it for you guys to read because it was everything I needed for the ending, and I would have been so bummed if I didn't get that extra epilogue because now I'm
That's
like
me.
I
That's
feel
me
a
over here, Barbara.
disservice to you guys.
But I feel like after we end this episode, Lauren's going to make Barbara be the audiobook reader and read it for her.
Yes.
And I will, because, like, yeah, it's a disservice because I feel like maybe she should have added that extra epilogue because, like, yeah, okay, cool, like, will they, won't
I feel
they?
so cheated.
Yes, exactly. Like, you want that as someone who likes that. You want that. That I would have felt definitely cheated. So I feel bad for you guys and happy for me.
I don't have a lot more to add beyond what the two of them have already said. I enjoyed their relationship. I thought it was really well written. I also, like Lauren has said, that enjoyed there not being a lot of tropey romance with this. It was very So when as listeners know, and Lauren and Barbara know, I don't always love reading romance in stories,
Please
especially when
don't
it's like
say.
when it's super tropey and it becomes the main focus. But I really enjoy it in historical fiction because I enjoy learning about like history and culture and stuff that, how things operated in different cultures, different times. And this really showed you how like the mechanics of romance worked in 1700s Korea. And so it was really interesting to see all of that and still get the little sparks here and there with them. So it was really well written, their relationship. I was excited to see them at the end of the epilogue that Lauren and I got to experience, have like a little bit of a chance at maybe a relationship. So yes, I enjoyed that. It was the relationship was cute. I liked the way it was handled. Well, that's it, guys. We've reached the end of another podcast. Let's talk about our individual scores for this book. Barbara, what was yours?
A 9. I loved, obviously, once again, I gushed throughout this whole podcast review. Like, honestly, I loved this book. I love the way she writes. I love the gray characters, the motivation, how she writes these characters. I just really enjoyed this book, and I've literally picked up all the rest of the books of her books. Like, I had bought 2 when we met her, and then I bought the other ones. So I will be reading all of these. I'm just really excited. I loved it. No notes.
I gave it an 8 out of 10. I also really loved it. Especially, like I said before, my favorite parts were the character arc. I think June Hur is an incredible author, and I'm excited that Barbara bought all of the books so that they're in my library to read also. So yeah, an 8 out of 10 was mine.
I also gave it an 8. I thought it was really good. I thought it brought, like, it was historical, but also fantastical elements, sort of, and also thriller mystery type stuff. I enjoyed it. I have a couple of her other books now that are in my TBR, like The Forest of Stolen Girls. I want to read that one.
That one sounds so good too.
Yeah, it sounds good to me. I haven't like read a whole lot of the descriptors of her other ones, but that one is already on my little TBR. So 8 out of 10.
So as we said, or as I said at the beginning, our group score for this one was an 8.3 out of 10, and I believe we all recommend going out and picking it up.
Jeez.
As we wrap up this episode, make sure you're following Badass Literature for free in your favorite podcast app. Give us a rating and leave us a review if they allow you to. Also, don't forget to be following us on social media. Our username on Instagram, Facebook, and Goodreads is at BadassLitPod. We'd love to hear from you there.
Have feedback about today's episode? You can contact us by writing to badassliteraturesociety@gmail.com. You can also send us a DM or leave a comment on any of the social media handles that Michael just listed.
As always, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you all next month. I'm Michael.
I'm Barbara.
I'm Lauren.
Bye.
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 Don't die at the red house.
Welcome back to the Badass Literature Society, where badasses come together to rate and review novels. I'm sorry, I can't.
I'll get it together.
Yeah.
Lauren, who's your nomination?
I thought Michael hadn't gone yet.
He just said that's mine.
I said that's my nomination also, and then we sat in silence.
Am I going to be editing this? This is going to be a hot mess.
Okay, I'll pause and then I'll go.